I am Emma Hayes, 34 years old, and I never imagined I would be sitting here today. While my sister Stephanie celebrated inheriting $700 million before our mother was even cold in her grave, I was left with nothing but an old phone. For weeks, I could not bring myself to turn it on. When I finally did, what I discovered changed everything. The truth was more valuable than any inheritance she received. Before I tell you what I discovered on my mom's phone and how it changed everything, let me know where you are watching from. Hit subscribe if you want to hear more stories about family secrets that turned lives upside down. Growing up in Seattle, our lives were comfortable but not extravagant. My mother, Diane Hayes, raised us mostly on her own after our father walked out when I was just 7 and Stephanie was 10. Despite being a single mom, she managed to provide us with a stable home in a nice neighborhood, all while working as an executive assistant at Hayes Industries, the family business my grandfather had built from nothing. The Hayes name carried weight in Seattle business circles. Our extended family controlled a vast empire of shipping, technology, and real estate holdings worth billions. Most of that wealth remained concentrated with my uncles and cousins who ran the company. My mother, despite being a Hayes by birth, had chosen a path that kept her somewhat removed from the family business politics, though she maintained her position there until her illness. Stephanie and I could not have been more different, even as children. She was tall, striking, with our father's confidence and ambition. I was quieter, more introspective, taking after our mother in both looks and temperament. From an early age, Stephanie seemed fixated on status and appearances. She would beg for designer clothes while I was content with whatever made me comfortable. When I brought home straight A's, Stephanie had to achieve A's and extra credit. It was never enough for her to succeed. She had to dominate. As we entered our teenage years, the gap between us widened. Stephanie joined every prestigious club, cultivated friendships with the children of influential families, and meticulously planned her future. I preferred a smaller circle of genuine friends and found joy in creative pursuits like photography and writing. My mother often joked that she had somehow raised 2 daughters from different planets. When Stephanie graduated high school at 17, she was accepted to Princeton with a partial scholarship. The day the acceptance letter arrived, she waved it in my face, saying, "This is how you make something of yourself, Emma. You should take notes." I was 15 at the time and already certain I wanted to become a teacher. For years later, when my turn for college came, I chose the University of Washington to stay close to Mom. Stephanie rarely came home during her college years, always claiming internships or study abroad opportunities. When she did visit, the house filled with tension. She criticized everything from Mom's decor to my career choice. "A teacher? Really, Emma? You could do so much better with our family name," she would say, as if my passion for education was somehow shameful. During her senior year at Princeton, Stephanie met Gregory Patterson, the son of a banking executive. Their courtship was brief and calculated. By 25, she had married into additional wealth and connections. Their wedding was a lavish affair at one of Seattle's most exclusive venues, with 500 guests, most of whom neither my mother nor I had ever met. Throughout the reception, Stephanie paraded around with Gregory, barely acknowledging us except for the obligatory photographs. While Stephanie climbed the social ladder, I completed my education degree and began teaching 4th grade at a public elementary school. I rented a small but cozy apartment 20 minutes from Mom's house and visited her several times a week. We would cook dinner together, watch old movies, or simply talk about my students and her day at work. Those quiet evenings became the foundation of our deepening bond. By the time I turned 30, Stephanie had positioned herself and Gregory firmly within Seattle's elite circles. They purchased a waterfront mansion, collected luxury cars, and vacationed in places that appeared in glossy magazines. Meanwhile, I found fulfillment in my classroom, in the progress of my students, and in the simple pleasures of my modest life. Our mother never played favorites, at least not openly. She attended Stephanie's social galas with the same enthusiasm she showed for the school plays I directed. She defended Stephanie when I complained about her superficial values and reminded Stephanie that there was more to life than acquisition and status. Mom was our bridge, the only person who could translate between our vastly different worlds. The extended Hayes family, however, made their preference clear. At rare family gatherings, my uncles and cousins gravitated towards Stephanie and Gregory, discussing investments and business opportunities. I was the Hayes who had chosen an ordinary life, and in their eyes, that made me less interesting, less valuable. Over time, I stopped attending family functions altogether, unable to stomach the thinly veiled disappointment in their eyes when they asked about my little teaching job. 3 years ago, Stephanie somehow maneuvered her way onto the board of Hayes Industries, despite having no formal role in the company. Mom seemed surprised but not entirely displeased. "Maybe having family representation will keep the company grounded," she said, though her tone suggested uncertainty. In retrospect, that was the beginning of everything that would follow. The relationships in our family were complicated, tangled by old resentments and unspoken expectations. But nothing prepared me for how those dynamics would explode when Mom got sick, or how the phone she left me would reveal that everything I thought I knew about our family was built on carefully constructed lies. The call came on a rainy Tuesday morning while I was teaching my class about fractions. The school secretary appeared at my classroom door with a somber expression that immediately sent ice through my veins. "Emma, your mother is in the hospital. They say you should come right away." I arranged emergency coverage for my class and drove to Swedish Medical Center in a blur of panic and prayer. When I arrived, a doctor with kind eyes and a grim expression met me in the waiting area. The words "aggressive cancer" and "spread throughout her lymphatic system" punctured my consciousness like bullets. They had found it during a routine physical, but it was already stage 4. The prognosis was 6 months, possibly less. Stephanie arrived 3 hours later, impeccably dressed in a designer suit, smelling of expensive perfume. She spoke to the doctors in clipped, efficient sentences, asking about experimental treatments and private care options. When she finally acknowledged me, it was with a cool nod and, "You look terrible, Emma. You should really pull yourself together." That night, I slept in the chair beside Mom's hospital bed while Stephanie returned to her mansion, promising to send her assistant the next day with some things to make this place more comfortable. Mom reached for my hand in the darkness and whispered, "It will be all right, sweetheart. Some things happen for a reason." The following weeks became a crash course in oncology as I researched treatment options and sought second opinions. Stephanie hired a medical consultant, but remained physically absent, attending only the occasional appointment between her business meetings and social obligations. When I confronted her about her absence, she bristled. "Some of us have responsibilities, Emma. I am making sure Mom has access to the best care money can buy. We all contribute in different ways." After initial treatments at the hospital, Mom insisted on returning to her home, a beautiful craftsman-style house that had been in the Hayes family for generations. It sat on a tree-lined street in Queen Anne, with a view of the Space Needle from the upstairs windows. The house was filled with family photographs, antique furniture passed down through generations, and the warm, lived-in feeling that made it instantly comforting. It was the only childhood home Stephanie and I had known, and it held the ghosts of happier times within its walls. I took an extended leave of absence from teaching to become Mom's primary caregiver. My principal was understanding, but my bank account was less forgiving. The modest teacher's salary that had been sufficient for my simple lifestyle quickly dwindled as I covered extra medical expenses and lost income. Stephanie offered financial assistance once, presenting it as charity rather than familial obligation. I declined, unable to accept help wrapped in condescension. Most days followed a gentle routine. I would help Mom with her medications in the morning, prepare breakfast that she rarely ate, and sit with her in the sunroom reading aloud from her favorite books. On good days, we would take slow walks around the garden she had lovingly tended for decades. On bad days, I held cold compresses to her forehead and whispered reassurances as the pain medications took their time to work. Stephanie visited approximately once every 2 weeks, always calling first to ensure her schedule was accommodated. She would sweep in with expensive flower arrangements and gourmet food baskets, spend precisely 1 hour discussing business matters with Mom, and then leave with promises to return soon. After these visits, Mom often seemed more tired, sometimes agitated. "Your sister means well," she would say when I failed to hide my frustration. "Stephanie expresses love differently than you do." As the weeks passed, Mom's condition deteriorated despite the aggressive treatments. Her once vibrant presence diminished, her body becoming frailer while her spirit seemed to grow more determined. During this time, she began making cryptic comments that I initially attributed to medication. "Everything is not as it seems, Emma," she said one evening as I adjusted her pillows. "The family, the business, there are things you should know." When I pressed for clarification, she would shake her head. "Not yet. When the time is right, you will understand." Around the 3-month mark after her diagnosis, strange visitors began appearing at the house. Men in expensive suits who identified themselves as associates from Hayes Industries would request private conversations with Mom. These meetings, though brief, left her exhausted but oddly satisfied, as if pieces of a puzzle were falling into place. After one such visit, Mom asked me to retrieve a box from the attic, a task that took hours as she directed me through decades of stored memories. Eventually, I found what she wanted, a small wooden chest containing old photographs, letters, and at the bottom, wrapped in silk, an outdated smartphone. "Keep this safe," she instructed, her fingers trembling as she handed the phone back to me after examining it. "When the time comes, this will matter more than you can imagine." I placed the phone in her bedside drawer, assuming it contained sentimental photos or messages. In retrospect, I should have asked more questions, should have pushed harder for answers while she was still strong enough to provide them. As month 4 slipped into 5, Mom's lucid periods became shorter and less frequent. The hospice nurse suggested moving her to a facility where she could receive round-the-clock care, but I resisted, knowing Mom wanted to remain in her home until the end. Stephanie, surprisingly, supported my decision, though I later wondered about her motivations. 2 weeks before she passed, during a rare moment of clarity, Mom beckoned me close to her bedside. Her voice was barely audible, forcing me to lean in until my ear nearly touched her lips. "The phone will explain everything," she whispered. "But promise me you will wait. After everything is settled, after the will, then look. Not before. Promise me, Emma." I promised, confused but unwilling to cause her additional distress. She seemed relieved, squeezing my hand with surprising strength before drifting back to sleep. The final days passed in a haze of morphine, whispered goodbyes, and tears I tried to hide. I read to her even when I was not sure she could hear me, played her favorite classical music, and told her stories about my students. Hospice staff came and went, offering compassionate support that somehow made the unbearable slightly more manageable. On her last night, I lay beside her on the bed, carefully navigating around 4 tubes and monitors. I told her it was okay to let go, that I would be all right, that I loved her beyond measure. In the pre-dawn hours, her breathing changed, becoming shallower. I held her hand as she took her final breath, her face peaceful in a way it had not been for months. Stephanie arrived 3 hours later, by which time the funeral home had already taken Mom's body. She stood in the empty bedroom, surveying the medical equipment that would need to be removed, and asked in a detached voice, "Did she say anything at the end? Anything important?" I thought of Mom's whispered instructions about the phone and felt a protective instinct rise within me. "She said she loved us both," I replied, the lie feeling strangely justified. "That is all." The funeral was held at St. Mark's Cathedral, a venue Stephanie selected without consulting me. The grand, echoing space filled with hundreds of attendees, most connected to Hayes Industries or Seattle's business elite. I recognized few of them. The service felt corporate, with carefully worded eulogies that spoke more of accomplishments than the woman I had known and loved. Stephanie delivered a polished speech about legacy and family values, dabbing at dry eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. When my turn came, I abandoned my prepared remarks and instead shared simple stories about Mom's kindness, her garden, her laugh. Several elderly relatives nodded in recognition, their eyes genuinely moist. Stephanie's smile tightened as I spoke, her displeasure evident in the rigid set of her shoulders. At the reception, held at the Four Seasons Hotel ballroom, I stood awkwardly in a black dress purchased specifically for the occasion. Executives shook my hand, murmuring condolences before gravitating towards Stephanie and Gregory, who held court near the bar. I overheard snippets of conversations about stock prices and board meetings, as if Mom's passing were a business matter to be resolved rather than a profound loss. Walter Bennett, the family attorney, approached me with a sympathetic smile. In his 70s, with silver hair and compassionate eyes, Walter had served the Hayes family for decades. He had drafted Mom's will and would oversee its execution. "Your mother was immensely proud of you, Emma," he said, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. "She spoke of you often during our meetings." "Did she mention Stephanie too?" I asked, immediately regretting the childish comparison. Walter's expression shifted subtly. "Your mother had complicated feelings about many things near the end. The will reading is scheduled for tomorrow at the family estate. Will you be all right attending?" "I could arrange a private consultation if you prefer." I assured him I would be present, though the thought of facing the entire Hayes clan filled me with dread. As Walter moved away, I noticed a tense exchange between Stephanie and a middle-aged man I recognized as the Hayes Industries CFO. Their conversation appeared heated until Gregory intervened, smoothly steering the executive toward a group of investors. The following day, I drove to the Hayes estate, a sprawling property north of the city that had belonged to our grandfather and now served as a family gathering place and unofficial business headquarters. The main house, an imposing colonial revival with white columns and perfectly manicured grounds, had always intimidated me. As a child, I had preferred exploring the gardens to sitting stiffly in formal rooms where I might break something valuable. The library, where the will reading would take place, featured floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, leather furniture, and an imposing portrait of our grandfather overlooking the proceedings with a stern expression. Family members arranged themselves according to an unspoken hierarchy, with Stephanie and Gregory positioned closest to Walter's makeshift podium. I selected a chair near the back, feeling like an outsider despite my Hayes blood. Walter cleared his throat and began with legal formalities, his voice steady and professional. I half listened, my mind wandering to memories of Mom in her garden, laughing as she taught me the names of flowers. The sudden silence snapped me back to attention. Walter was looking at me with an unreadable expression. To summarize the key provisions, he continued, Diane Hayes has bequeathed her controlling interest in Hayes Industries, all associated financial accounts, real estate holdings including the Queen and residence, and personal property therein to her daughter, Stephanie Hayes Patterson. Murmurs rippled through the room as I struggled to process his words. Stephanie's face remained impassive, though I detected the slight curl of satisfaction at the corner of her mouth. The total value of the bequest is approximately $700 million, Walter added, causing another wave of whispers. My hands felt numb as I waited for him to continue, to explain what provisions had been made for me. Surely Mom had not left me nothing. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Walter addressed me directly. To her daughter Emma Hayes, Diane leaves her personal mobile phone and the contents of her grandmother's trinket box. The room seemed to tilt around me. Someone chuckled, quickly silenced by a glare from Walter. Stephanie did not bother hiding her smirk as she turned to accept congratulations from an uncle. I sat frozen, unable to comprehend how Mom could have made such an unequal division, how she could have valued me so little in comparison to my sister. Walter continued reading through smaller bequests to distant relatives and charitable organizations, but I barely heard him. When the formalities concluded, he approached me with a small wooden box and the phone I had retrieved from the attic months earlier. "Your mother had her reasons, Emma," he said quietly. "I am not at liberty to discuss them, but please know that she agonized over these decisions." I accepted the items mechanically, my throat too tight for words. As I moved toward the exit, Stephanie intercepted me, her designer heels clicking on the hardwood floor. "Do not look so devastated, Emma," she said, her voice pitched to carry to those nearby. "We both know you never had the capacity to handle wealth or responsibility." Mother recognized that. "Besides, you have that charming little teaching career to keep you occupied." I pushed past her, unable to formulate a response that would not dissolve into tears or screaming. As I reached the door, I overheard a conversation between two board members I did not recognize. "Remarkable timing," one said. "Stephanie presenting the acquisition proposal next week and now controlling the family shares. Almost as if it were planned. Diane must have been more heavily medicated than we thought to sign everything over," the other replied. The Emma girl got properly shafted. I drove home in a fog of grief and bewilderment, the phone and trinket box sitting accusingly on my passenger seat. By the time I reached my apartment, a text from Stephanie had arrived. "The house needs to be vacated within 30 days. I will have a service pack mother's things for donation. Anything you want should be removed by next Friday." Just like that, I had lost not only my mother, but my childhood home and any sense of financial security I might have had. The phone remained untouched on my coffee table, Mom's final instructions echoing in my mind. "Wait until everything is settled." I respected her wishes, though I could not fathom what the device might contain that warranted such secrecy. The weeks following the will reading passed in a blur of practical matters and emotional numbness. I returned to teaching, grateful for the routine and the innocent enthusiasm of my fourth graders. Their concerns about multiplication tables and playground politics provided welcome distraction from my own troubles. Repeated attempts to contact Stephanie about preserving family photographs and mementos went unanswered until finally, her assistant informed me that everything had been placed in storage and would be dealt with appropriately. When I drove past Mom's house, I saw workers replacing the charming garden with modern landscaping that Mom would have hated. An eviction notice arrived for my apartment shortly thereafter. The building had been purchased by a subsidiary of Hayes Industries, and all units were being converted to luxury condominiums. The timing seemed too convenient to be coincidental, but I had no proof of malicious intent. My savings account dwindled as I placed deposits on a smaller apartment farther from the city center. Through it all, Mom's phone sat in my bedside drawer, untouched. I was both curious and fearful about its contents, sensing that once I crossed that threshold, nothing would be the same. So I waited, honoring her request while my life slowly unraveled around me. Financial pressure mounted as medical bills arrived for portions of Mom's care not covered by insurance. Though I had not signed as financially responsible, the collection agencies were persistent. When I contacted Walter Bennett about these expenses, his assistant informed me he was no longer handling Hayes' family matters and provided the contact information for Stephanie's new attorney. The 1-month anniversary of Mom's death arrived on a Friday. I called in sick to work, unable to face bright young faces while feeling so hollow inside. Instead, I sat on my half-packed apartment floor, surrounded by cardboard boxes and fading photographs. Grief crashed over me in waves until I could barely breathe through the pain of it. As evening fell, I found myself staring at the phone that represented my entire inheritance. Whatever Mom's reasons, this device had been important enough to specifically bequeath to me. Perhaps it was time to discover why. The phone was an older model iPhone, at least 6 or 7 years out of date. When I pressed the power button, nothing happened. I searched through boxes until I found a compatible charger and plugged it in, watching impatiently as the Apple logo appeared on the screen. After several minutes, a passcode prompt displayed. I tried Mom's birthday, then mine, then Stephanie's, with no success. Finally, I entered my birth year, and the phone unlocked. The home screen appeared normal at first glance, standard apps, a background photo of Mom's garden. I opened her photo gallery first, finding the expected collection of family pictures, garden snapshots, and everyday moments. Nothing seemed unusual until I noticed a hidden album labeled simply Evidence. My hands trembled as I tapped the icon. Dozens of photos appeared, organized into folders with dates spanning the past 3 years. The first contained screenshots of emails between Stephanie and executives at competing companies, discussing confidential Hayes Industries information. Another showed bank statements with suspicious transfers from company accounts to offshore holdings. Most disturbing were photographs taken in Mom's home without her knowledge, Stephanie accessing Mom's computer, replacing medication bottles, adding something to Mom's tea. In one particularly clear image, Stephanie could be seen placing documents in front of a visibly disoriented Mom for signature. I moved to the voice memo app next, finding dozens of recordings. With shaking fingers, I pressed play on the first, dated 2 years earlier. Emma, if you are listening to this, then everything has happened as I feared it might. Mom's voice, stronger than I had heard it in months, filled my silent apartment. I have discovered troubling information about Stephanie's activities within Hayes Industries. She has been embezzling funds, selling proprietary information to competitors, and systematically undermining the company my father built. I listened in stunned silence as Mom methodically detailed Stephanie's crimes, explaining how she had gathered evidence with the help of trusted employees. She had discovered Stephanie's betrayal accidentally, finding discrepancies in reports while working on a company archive project. I contemplated confronting her, Mom continued, but realized that would only drive her activities deeper underground. Instead, I began documenting everything, building a case that would be irrefutable. The recordings continued, each more shocking than the last. Mom explained how Stephanie had been manipulating company stock, planning to sell controlling interest to foreign investors who would dismantle the business for parts. She detailed meetings with board members where Stephanie had spread lies about Mom's mental competence to strengthen her own position. Then came the most stunning revelation of all. "There is something you should know about Stephanie," Mom said, her voice dropping to nearly a whisper. Something I discovered during my investigation that explains so much about her behavior over the years. My breath caught as Mom revealed that DNA testing, conducted as part of her medical treatment, had shown something unexpected. Stephanie was not biologically related to us. The implications were staggering. Stephanie was not my biological sister. She was not Mom's biological daughter. "I have not yet determined the full truth," Mom continued. "But I believe your father may have had another family before us. When he left, he may have manipulated me into raising his daughter from that relationship. It would explain Stephanie's birth, certificate irregularities, and the gaps in her early medical records." The final recording, made just weeks before Mom's death, explained her shocking decision regarding the will. "I am leaving everything to Stephanie for a reason, Emma. The inheritance is a trap. With controlling interest in the company, she will immediately implement her plan to sell to overseas investors. The evidence I have gathered, which you now possess, will be sufficient for the board and authorities to stop the sale and bring charges against her. Sometimes we must sacrifice what we value to protect what we love." Mom's voice broke slightly. "I know this burden is unfair to you, my darling girl. But you are the only one I trust with this task. The only one with the strength and integrity to see it through." In the trinket box, you will find a USB drive with copies of all this evidence, as well as a key. The key opens a safe deposit box at Seattle First, where I have stored the original will, which includes provisions for you that Stephanie's manipulated version does not. I sat motionless as the recording ended, overwhelmed by revelations that rewrote my entire family history. After several minutes, I retrieved the trinket box, a delicate silver filigree container that had belonged to my grandmother. Inside, nestled among vintage costume jewelry, I found a small USB drive and a safety deposit box key attached to a tag with the number 3271. Examining the box more carefully, I discovered a false bottom, revealing additional memory cards and a handwritten letter from Mom explaining that she had been gathering evidence for years, suspecting Stephanie's true nature long before she had proof. The letter concluded with instructions to contact Jessica Anderson, a former college friend of Mom's who now worked as a prosecuting attorney specializing in financial crimes. That night, sleep eluded me as I grappled with impossible decisions. Exposing Stephanie would mean publicly destroying what remained of our family, but remaining silent would betray Mom's trust and allow Hayes Industries to be dismantled for profit. By morning, exhausted but resolved, I knew what I had to do. I contacted Jessica Anderson the following Monday, explaining the situation without revealing the most damning evidence. She agreed to meet privately at her office after hours, where I could share the contents of the phone securely. Jessica was in her early 50s, with practical silver streaked hair and no-nonsense glasses. She had attended law school with Mom and maintained their friendship over decades. After reviewing the evidence for nearly 3 hours, she sat back with a grave expression. "Your mother built an airtight case," she said. "This goes beyond family drama, Emma. We are looking at securities fraud, embezzlement, elder abuse, and possibly attempted murder if we can prove Stephanie was tampering with medications." "Would it hold up in court?" I asked, the reality of potential criminal proceedings making my stomach clench. Not only would it hold up, but the SEC and FBI would likely become involved given the scale of financial crimes and the attempt to sell American technology interests to foreign entities, Jessica replied. "But you need to understand what this means. Once this process begins, there is no stopping it. Your sister, or rather Stephanie, would almost certainly face prison time." I thought of the little girl who had once begrudgingly shared her toys with me, the teenager who had taught me to apply mascara, the woman who had stood cold and calculating at our mother's funeral. Whatever bond we might have shared had been severed long ago by her choices, not mine. "I need to think," I said finally. "There are still pieces missing. I want to check the safe deposit box before making any decisions." The following day, I visited Seattle First Bank, where the manager escorted me to the vault after verifying my identification. Safe deposit box 3271 contained a sealed envelope marked Original Will of Diane Hayes, a USB drive labeled Board Presentation Evidence, and a thick folder of legal documents. Most surprising was a DNA test report confirming that Stephanie and I were not biologically related, along with adoption papers that had never been filed. I took these materials to Walter Bennett's private residence, bypassing his office where Stephanie might have allies. The elderly attorney appeared unsurprised by my visit, inviting me into a book-lined study that reminded me of our grandfather's library. "I wondered when you would come," he said, accepting the envelope containing the original will. "Your mother swore me to secrecy, but I have been hoping you would discover the truth." Walter confirmed what the evidence suggested. Mom had created 2 wills. The public version, leaving everything to Stephanie, was designed to give her enough rope to hang herself. The original document, which we now reviewed together, divided the estate equally between Stephanie and me, with provisions protecting Hayes Industries from being sold without board approval. "Your mother knew Stephanie had gained too much influence over certain board members," Walter explained. "She needed irrefutable evidence of wrongdoing before challenging her. The inheritance was bait for a trap that Stephanie would spring herself." Walter agreed to help me navigate the legal complexities ahead, suggesting we gather additional documentation before confronting Stephanie. She has resources and connections, he warned. We need overwhelming evidence that cannot be explained away. Armed with this additional information, I spent the next week meticulously organizing evidence and consulting with Jessica about legal strategy. We agreed that before involving authorities, I should confront Stephanie directly, recording the conversation as additional evidence. I arranged to meet Stephanie at the family estate under the pretense of discussing personal items from Mom's house that I wished to retrieve. She agreed reluctantly, undoubtedly expecting another opportunity to belittle me. When I arrived, Stephanie was waiting in the main sitting room, dressed impeccably in a designer suit despite it being Sunday. She barely looked up from her phone as I entered. "Make this quick, Emma. I have dinner reservations at 7, she said dismissively. Instead of responding, I placed Mom's phone on the coffee table between us. Her eyes flickered to it momentarily, then back to my face, her expression carefully neutral. "Mom's phone," I said quietly. "My entire inheritance. Except it turns out it is worth far more than $700 million. Stephanie's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. "If you came here for money, you are wasting both our time." The will was perfectly clear. "Yes, the will you manipulated her into signing while she was heavily medicated," I replied, watching her face. "The will that differs significantly from the original version, safely stored with Walter Bennett." "I have no idea what you are talking about," Stephanie said, but her knuckles whitened around her phone. Mother made her choices based on who was qualified to handle the family legacy. I removed a folder from my bag and began placing photographs on the table one by one. Is this how qualified people handle family legacies? Drugging their mother? Stealing from the company? Selling proprietary technology to Chinese investors? With each image, Stephanie's carefully composed facade cracked further. When I played a recording of her discussing stock manipulation with a board member, her expression shifted from shock to cold fury. "Where did you get these?" she demanded, standing abruptly. "Mom was gathering evidence for years," I replied, remaining seated. "She knew everything, Stephanie. About the embezzlement, the corporate espionage, the plans to sell Hayes Industries. She even knew you are not her biological daughter." That final revelation landed like a physical blow. Stephanie staggered slightly, gripping the back of her chair. "That is a lie," she whispered, but uncertainty clouded her eyes. "DNA tests don't lie," I said, sliding the lab results toward her. "According to these, we're not even half-sisters. Mom found adoption papers that were never filed. It seems our father had another family before us. When he left, he somehow convinced Mom to raise his daughter from that relationship." Stephanie's face drained of color as she scanned the document. For a moment, I glimpsed the frightened child beneath her polished exterior, the girl who had perhaps always sensed she didn't quite belong. The moment of vulnerability passed quickly. Her expression hardened as she calculated her options. "What do you want, Emma? Money? Is that it? Name your price to make this disappear." Her voice had regained its confidence, the negotiator replacing the shocked woman of moments before. "This isn't about money," I said. "It is about justice for Mom and protecting the company grandfather built. The board meets tomorrow to vote on your acquisition proposal. I'll be there with all of this evidence." Stephanie laughed, the sound brittle and cold. "You really are naive. Half the board is already in my pocket. The others are too afraid to challenge me. No one will believe the bitter, jealous sister who got cut out of the will." "They'll believe this," I replied, revealing the USB drive. "And the FBI will be very interested in your offshore accounts and communications with foreign entities about protected technology." Something dangerous flashed in Stephanie's eyes. She moved toward me with such sudden aggression that I stumbled backward, knocking over a side table. "You stupid, pathetic little nobody," she hissed. "I have worked too hard and come too far to be ruined by some schoolteacher with a martyrdom complex. I earned this. I am the one who built relationships while you played house with Mommy. I am the one who secured the Patterson connection and leveraged it for the family. Everything I did was to increase our position. You stole from your own family, I countered. You betrayed the mother who raised you. She wasn't my mother, Stephanie shouted, her composure finally shattering completely. I always knew something was wrong. The way she looked at you differently. The way she never fully trusted me. When I found out the truth years ago, everything made sense. Why should I be loyal to people who aren't even my blood? Why shouldn't I take what I deserve? Her confession, captured clearly by the recording device in my pocket, was more damning than anything on Mom's phone. As Stephanie realized what she had revealed, her expression shifted from rage to calculation. 50%, she offered abruptly. I'll amend the will, split everything equally. We can run Hayes Industries together. Your idealism, my business acumen. Think about it, Emma. You could do so much good with that kind of wealth. Fund education initiatives, scholarships, whatever pet projects appeal to your bleeding heart. The offer was tempting for a fleeting moment. With that kind of money, I could transform countless lives. But accepting would mean becoming complicit in Stephanie's crimes, betraying everything Mom had stood for. It's too late for deals, I said quietly. The board already has copies of everything. So does Jessica Anderson at the prosecutor's office. This conversation is being recorded. It's over, Stephanie. Her face contorted with rage as she lunged toward me again, this time grabbing for the phone on the table. I stepped back quickly, but not before she knocked the evidence folder to the floor, scattering photographs across the expensive carpet. Get out, she snarled. Get out before I call security and have you arrested for trespassing and extortion. I gathered the fallen evidence with shaking hands, never turning my back to her. The board meets at 10 tomorrow. I'll see you there. As I left the estate, I glanced back to see Stephanie through the window, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing frantically. The confrontation had gone almost exactly as Jessica had predicted. Now we needed to move quickly, before Stephanie could destroy evidence or flee the country. From my car, I called Walter, who initiated the contingency plan we had developed. By morning, the original will would be filed with the court, freezing all assets pending investigation. Jessica would contact the SEC with evidence of securities fraud, while trusted board members would receive comprehensive briefings on Stephanie's activities. The trap Mom had so carefully laid was about to spring shut. I felt no triumph, only a profound sadness for what our family had become, and gratitude for a mother whose wisdom and foresight extended beyond her grave. The Hayes Industries board meeting began in chaos. News of potential fraud had leaked overnight, sending stock prices plummeting and bringing financial reporters to camp outside headquarters. I arrived early with Walter and Jessica, setting up in a conference room adjacent to the boardroom where we could monitor proceedings. Stephanie arrived late, flanked by her personal attorney and Gregory, whose expression suggested he was only beginning to comprehend the trouble his wife faced. Through the glass partition, I watched her attempt to take control of the meeting, calling for an immediate vote on the acquisition proposal. The board chairman, Lawrence Hayes, my second cousin, interrupted her. Before we proceed, we need to address some troubling information that has come to light, he announced, nodding toward the door where security personnel were entering alongside two individuals who identified themselves as FBI agents. What followed was a corporate version of a palace coup. Board members who had received evidence overnight rose one by one to challenge Stephanie's authority. The FBI agents announced they had warrants to seize records and electronic devices related to an investigation into corporate espionage and securities fraud. Stephanie's composure crumbled as she realized the extent of her isolation. Gregory physically distanced himself, moving to the opposite side of the room and engaging in whispered conversation with his own attorney. When the agents approached Stephanie to confiscate her devices, she attempted to delete information from her phone, resulting in it being forcibly removed from her hand. Within hours, news of the Hayes Industries scandal dominated local media, with national business publications quickly picking up the story. Stephanie was escorted from the building by federal agents, her arrest on multiple charges imminent. The acquisition vote was indefinitely postponed, and an emergency board session appointed interim leadership to stabilize the company. I watched these developments with emotional detachment, as if observing a movie rather than the implosion of my family. Walter stayed by my side, providing context for the legal proceedings that would follow. Jessica coordinated with federal prosecutors, ensuring Mom's evidence was properly handled and preserved. In the days that followed, the full scope of Stephanie's crimes became clear. Beyond the financial fraud and corporate espionage, investigators discovered evidence of tax evasion, money laundering, and multiple instances of identity theft using Mom's personal information. The medication tampering proved more difficult to prosecute, but charges of elder abuse were added to the growing list. Gregory filed for divorce within a week, his attorneys working frantically to distance him from his wife's criminal activities. He claimed ignorance of her actions, though evidence suggested he had benefited significantly from them. The Patterson family closed ranks, issuing statements expressing shock and disappointment. Media attention turned to me, the schoolteacher's sister who had exposed the fraud. Reporters camped outside my apartment and school, forcing me to take additional leave. Walter arranged temporary accommodation at a secure building owned by a Hayes family associate who had opposed Stephanie's leadership. As Stephanie's case moved through the legal system, more family secrets emerged. DNA testing confirmed that she was indeed not biologically related to Mom or me. Further investigation revealed our father had briefly been married to another woman before meeting Mom, fathering Stephanie during that relationship. When that marriage collapsed, he had somehow convinced Mom to accept Stephanie as her own when they married, creating false documentation to support the deception. This revelation cast our childhood in a new light, explaining tensions I had never fully understood. Mom had raised another woman's child as her own, loving Stephanie despite knowing the truth about her parentage. That knowledge made Stephanie's betrayal even more painful to contemplate. With the original will now recognized as valid, I found myself co-appointed with Walter as executor of Mom's estate. The process of unwinding Stephanie's financial manipulations proved complex, requiring forensic accountants and legal specialists. Hayes Industries stocks gradually stabilized as interim leadership restored confidence in the company's governance. Extended family members who had previously ignored me now sought connection, some genuinely remorseful for their earlier dismissal, others clearly hoping to secure advantage in the new family power structure. I maintained polite distance from most, trusting few beyond Walter and Jessica, who had proven their loyalty to Mom's memory. 3 months after the board meeting confrontation, Stephanie accepted a plea agreement rather than face trial. The terms included significant prison time, financial restitution, and cooperation in ongoing investigations of her business associates. I did not attend her sentencing hearing, finding no satisfaction in her downfall, only a lingering sadness for what might have been. With legal matters progressing toward resolution, I finally returned to Mom's house, now legally mine along with half the Hayes fortune. Standing in rooms that contained so many memories, I felt her presence more strongly than I had since her death. In her bedroom, now cleared of medical equipment, I found a journal hidden in her nightstand, its pages filled with her thoughts during her final months. I wonder if I made the right choices, she had written. Protecting Emma from family politics kept her pure of heart, but unprepared for the battles ahead. Stephanie's ambition might have been channeled positively had I been more honest about her origins. My silence created wounds in both my daughters, though in vastly different ways. The journal revealed Mom's struggle with her decisions, her awareness of Stephanie's growing corruption, and her determination to protect Hayes Industries and the employees who depended on it. The final entry, dated just days before her death, contained a message that brought me to tears. Emma will find her way through this maze of deception and greed. Her inheritance is not the money or the company, but the strength of character that will guide her to make better choices than I did. My greatest hope is that she will build something new from these broken pieces, something worthy of the sacrifices made. With these words echoing in my mind, I began the process of honoring Mom's true legacy. Rather than assuming a role in Hayes Industries management, I established a foundation focused on educational opportunities for underprivileged students. Using a portion of my inheritance, I created scholarship programs and teacher support initiatives that aligned with my professional passion. The majority of Mom's business holdings I placed in a trust, appointing respected industry leaders to manage them with emphasis on ethical practices and employee well-being. Walter helped structure these arrangements to ensure long-term stability while allowing me to focus on the foundation work that gave me purpose. 6 months after Stephanie's sentencing, I received an unexpected letter from a woman named Cassandra living in Portland. DNA testing had revealed she was Stephanie's full biological sister, unaware until recently of her connection to the Hayes family. We arranged to meet, finding in each other a tentative connection that helped heal some of the wounds left by Stephanie's betrayal. Mom's house I renovated thoughtfully, preserving its character while updating systems for efficiency. The garden I restored according to her original designs, adding a memorial bench where I often sat with my morning coffee, imagining conversations we might have had about all that had transpired. Teaching remained my vocation, though I reduced my schedule to accommodate foundation responsibilities. My students remained blissfully unaware of my family drama and financial status, treating me as they always had, with the unfiltered honesty that had drawn me to education initially. Occasionally, I visited Stephanie at the federal facility where she was serving her sentence. Our conversations remained strained, neither of us quite knowing how to relate to each other given all that had happened. She expressed no genuine remorse, but seemed to be reflecting on her choices with new perspective. Whether that would lead to meaningful change remained to be seen. 1 year after Mom's death, I held a small private memorial in her garden, attended by the few people who had truly known and valued her. Jessica brought daisies, Mom's favorite. Walter shared stories of their early friendship. My closest teaching colleagues provided the uncomplicated support that had sustained me through the darkest days. As twilight settled over the gathering, I found myself filled with unexpected peace. The phone that had changed everything rested in my desk drawer, its purpose fulfilled. The truth it contained had caused pain, but also brought resolution, allowing wounds to finally begin healing. Mom's final gift had not been the money or property, but the opportunity to reclaim our family's integrity, to rebuild something broken into something whole. The inheritance that mattered was the wisdom to recognize that wealth without purpose is meaningless, and that true legacy lies not in what we accumulate, but in what we build for others. In the garden her hands had tended, surrounded by friends who valued me for who I was rather than what I owned, I silently thanked her for the most valuable inheritance of all, the courage to face truth, however painful, and the wisdom to use it for good. I often think about how differently everything could have turned out if I had never turned on that phone. Sometimes the smallest actions lead to the most profound changes. That old device, seemingly worthless compared to $700 million, contained the truth that ultimately proved more valuable than any amount of money. It has been 18 months since I discovered what was on Mom's phone. The Hayes Family Foundation now provides college scholarships to over 100 students annually, with special focus on future educators. The company has recovered from Stephanie's damage, with ethical leadership and renewed commitment to the employees who make its success possible. My life has found a new balance. I teach 3 days a week and oversee foundation work the remaining time. The modest apartment I once struggled to afford has been replaced by Mom's house, now filled with warmth and frequent visitors. Financial security allows me to focus on what matters rather than worrying about survival. Healing from betrayal takes time. Some days I still struggle with anger towards Stephanie, with questions about our father's deception, with wonder at how Mom managed to love us both despite knowing the truth. Therapy helps, as does the journal I keep in imitation of Mom's practice. Stephanie will be eligible for parole in 5 years. What happens afterward remains uncertain. Though I maintain contact through occasional visits and letters, true reconciliation seems distant. The revelations about her biological origins provided context for her behavior, but not excuses. Each of us makes choices that define our character, regardless of circumstances. Cassandra, Stephanie's biological sister, has become an unexpected connection to a different kind of family relationship. We meet monthly for coffee, sharing stories that help fill gaps in both our understandings of the past. Through her, I have glimpsed what Stephanie might have been without the corrosive effects of greed and resentment. Walter continues to provide wise counsel, though he has officially retired from legal practice. At 82, he now serves as a board member for the foundation, bringing decades of experience to our mission. His friendship has been a steady constant amid so much change. The most important lesson I have learned through this journey is that inheritance takes many forms. While society focuses on material wealth, the true valuables we receive from those who came before us are wisdom, values, and the example of how to live with integrity. Mom understood this truth and embedded it in her final gift to me. The phone sits in a special box in my study, preserved as a reminder of Mom's foresight and courage. Beside it rests her journal, a grandmother's trinket box, and photographs of her garden in full bloom. These simple objects tell the story of a woman who recognized that truth, however painful, is the only foundation for a meaningful life. If you have ever discovered a family secret that changed everything, share your experience in the comments below. How did you handle the truth? Did it ultimately make your relationship stronger or create distance? I would love to hear your stories. And if this account of my journey resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more reflections on family, truth, and finding your way through difficult transitions. Thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes the most valuable inheritances are not the ones we can measure in dollars.